Hello everyone, welcome back to another Babbling Irons breakdown video with myself, Mike, and Sloth today. This is a really interesting league. It's a player that's clearly high profile at the moment, had a fantastic season in Ligue 1 last year at Nice. That is, of course, Jean-Clair Todibo. Just a little bit of an overview here for you if you're not familiar with who that is. He's a French international. He's made 2 appearances for France now. Centre-back, 6'3", contract ends in around 2027 June, and his estimated value of around 45 million euros right now. And yeah, we've had an initial bid rejected of around 35 million euros, if reports are to be believed. And I think The Athletic just recently said that we might be going back in. I think we're deliberating whether we want to go back in for him or not. So I think we're pushing pretty hard on centre backs right now. And, you know, Kilman's been a really difficult one to get over the line. We've looked at the likes of Greaves. Obviously, Calafiori is a really difficult one to do as well. So let's just kind of break down the player first. Todibo, what are your initial thoughts, Sloth, on that link to Todibo?
He's like the sort of player and the sort of interest he's gathering is top level. You know, he didn't sign for Barcelona for no reason. Yeah, he had a few shaky seasons, and you know, he was loaned out there because he wasn't forcing himself into the reckoning. But over his time at Nice, he's very much solidified himself as one of the top central defenders, or one of those central defenders ready to make a step up to the top, is probably the best way of putting it. He's got all the skill set needed. You know, he's got all the attributes. He's 6'3", he's quick. He's very competent on the ball. And I think that the issues with the deal aren't necessarily about him. There's a couple of things, a couple of areas he can improve in, but the big sticking point for this deal is not going to be the player himself. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you mentioned there, he obviously had that difficult time at Barcelona. To be honest, a lot of people were saying he wouldn't really get the chance to play football before that, but he obviously overcame those issues beforehand. Was again through a period of Barcelona where they were going through an absolute shambles at the same time. You know, they really were, and you know, he's come out on the other side of that. As you say, he got that loan move to Nice that was made permanent. He's played alongside the likes of Saliba, when Saliba was on loan from Arsenal there as well. And he's had Dante as well this season, as you mentioned before, on the TikTok, which if you haven't seen that, make sure to check that out. We're posting on TikTok now. But yeah, Todibo would be an interesting move. I think we're clearly looking for a ball-playing centre-back. And, you know, when we look at these sort of statistics that are coming out, it's very evident that Todibo falls into that category. You know, very comfortable in possession, probably one of the most comfortable centre-backs in Europe in terms of, you know, how he wants to play on the ball. But again, you can kind of see the breakdown, such high percentiles for all of those different passing statistics. And, you know, even the long range passes, you know, per 90, he's completed 9 of those. Passes into the final third is pretty high. Progressive passes really high. So you can kind of see, and again, on the right-hand side, you've got possession statistics, which focusing on the likes of the carries, the carrying distance. He's someone that's going to bring the ball out of that defense. So what are your thoughts on it, Mike? Because it's an interesting link for a 35 million euro bid that's been rejected. Are we going to have to go a little bit higher than that to secure him?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the bid we made was accepted for Manchester United. What a surprise. Funny enough, that Ratcliffe managed to negotiate with himself a price that he deemed acceptable. But thankfully, for probably the rest of Europe, he was told, no, you can't basically do that. But yeah, personally, Todibo, I've liked for quite a while. I liked him when he was at Barcelona. I felt, he joined at Barcelona at a time where they were trying to find the long-term heir to Piqué. They were also bringing through Rocco at the same time. So it was a difficult period for Barcelona when they was trying to settle and find that, and it didn't really work. And the loan subsequently also didn't work. But to Sloth's point, since he's gone to Nice, has really settled and really kind of been able to establish and grow as a football player, and essentially be the player that why he was talked about as a £50 million player in the summer before, obviously, Ionas decided to buy Man United and try and pull a fast one. So I think it's a really intelligent deal from us. And if by hook or by crook or how some way we managed to team him up with, say, Max Kilman, that brings a defence that is incredibly comfortable and absolutely solidifies that we are going to be changing how we play, and we are going to be more akin to Lopetegui or Sevilla than the Lopetegui of Wolves. There'll obviously be some pragmatism along the way because, as he said, you have to find ways to win, and he will play ways that he believes will win. But it does give him essentially a player who can defend and who can also then, if needs be incredibly comfortable on the ball. And I think for Todibo, it's probably, if he is very much interested, say, in a move to Man United in the future, I could see him and his agent having a conversation such as, this will be a good move for me because in the next 1 to 2 years, if I have a good season, they're still interested, I no longer have an obstacle in which to go to, say, an elite club and move on.
Well, let's take a look at those kind of defensive statistics because, we've mentioned they're very comfortable in possession. We've seen his passing statistics. He's someone that, can switch to play very easily and does it very well. But defensively as well, a very solid player. You can kind of see here across the board, tackles and interceptions. Again, the dribbles tackled, etc. The areas he's making those tackles as well kind of show the aggressiveness and the way he needs play. So again, he's pretty high percentile for tackles in the attacking third. So in terms of his defensive compatibility, Sloth, who would you say he's most similar to as a player right now? And does he have the ability to transition into the Premier League?
I think he'll easily make the step up into the Premier League. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been more interest at the top level in him from Premier League sides. I know that a number of top clubs, I think even Italian clubs have been linked with him. But aside from Manchester United, he is the type of player who would walk into the Premier League. He's got the speed, he's got the height and the physical strength. Going back to those passing stats, the only thing that really wasn't in the green there is his long pass completion, and it goes back to what I kind of said on the TikTok about him. Sometimes choosing to play the Hollywood pass, trying to play the difficult one instead of the easy ball. And I think, to be honest with you, that every defender is going to make a mistake at some point. Those are the only ones that he really needs to refine in his game, because everywhere else is pretty strong. He does like to get forward, and it can leave players exposed. But I think if you have someone like a Kilman who's more naturally sitting, like he's had with Dante this season, someone who's naturally a bit more comfortable sitting back or sitting on the halfway line, that's going to complement him really well.
Does he need that partner to be successful if he was to come to West Ham? Because, say he was playing next to Aguerd, does that work as a balance?
I think Aguerd's pace would be helpful, but I just don't think Aguerd has the
awareness.
I think it's about having a solid reader next to him, because I think I think a really good way to put it is think of Balbuena and think of Diop in that first season under Pellegrini, where you had an incredibly aggressive centre-back who would break out, win the ball, push things forward. However, he's a better tackler, better physically, and a better passer, as well as probably better in the air. So most of those attributes that we lauded, say, Issa Diop for in that period.
Yeah.
And let's remember a player that Mourinho called a monster after the way he absolutely manhandled and bossed Lukaku in the game at London Stadium. He has all of those and more, especially from a concentration point of view. But when that player is paired with someone who is as good as reading the game and as on their game as Balbuena was in that season, all of a sudden you have a partnership that is really well balanced. And that's probably, if I'm trying to think for a way that West Ham fans can kind of remember and kind of think of in recent history, that's probably the centre-back pairing that you arguably need in which to make that work, because of his aggression does that. And then when you look to those interceptions and where he wins the ball, it's because he can read the game well and he's incredibly aggressive. If there is a slight loose ball or a ball that is slightly undercooked, if he believes he can get there, he will burst out of defence to win that ball. And because he's comfortable in possession, he can then carry that. And good passer, he can also make the right passes. You give him space, he can play between the lines, and he will also, to Sloth's point, he will look for the Hollywood pass, but he also does make also intelligent diagonals. Again, he likes to build up play. So I think from a player point of view, you need to have a strong player next to him. And I think whilst Kilman's not necessarily my top pick or what have you, I still think he'll be a player that could very much complement. And I think if you're also looking at players that maybe you could compare him to, Maxime Lacroix, who plays for Wolfsburg, who's currently just apparently is now available because in the last year of his contract and not going to renew his deal. Yeah, so Mr. Salty. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that one linked. And Kevin Danzo, I say, is a fairly similar player in terms of the aggressiveness defensively and his comfortability on the ball. I wouldn't say Danzo, for instance, is as aggressive coming out to try and win the ball in midfield, for instance. But I think that's probably two players that you could say are similar. I think definitely statistically they are very similar to Todibo, who I think the right partner is a very good player to have in your team.
Would Todibo likely replace Mavropanos' spot on that right centre-back role? Because, again, I'm trying to think of if you think of Mavropanos, his game is also on that. He's got a good turn of pace. He brings the ball out. He's quite aggressive in the way he plays. What is kind of difference between those two for people who aren't really aware of Todibo?
I would suggest that Todibo's concentration is maybe a little bit better. Was there also, when you looked at the statistics, he had fairly high miscontrols? I don't think that those miscontrols are more from where he's coming out to try and intercept, or he takes he will try and bring the ball, push the ball out from his feet when he kind of receives the ball. So that can be it. Whereas with Mavropanos, I think there can be the occasional lapse in concentration that can, essentially, as we've seen this year, be a loose pass into a dangerous area, or maybe a kind of miscontrol. I think some of that was ring rust, in fairness to Mavropanos. But I would say, as much as I do rate him, I also think Todibo is a slight touch above. And also, there's every chance, if we don't get a right back, or maybe we don't find the right type of right back, we may also think, well, Mavropanos can play on that right.
I actually think he'd be really good as a right back. I think he has some pretty
he's done it for Stuttgart, and he's been an absolute rampaging right back for Stuttgart. If you've ever watched him at Stuttgart, he's also scored a couple of brilliant goals on that right-hand side. So there's every chance that we may look, for instance, to say, well, maybe we get to Debo, push the boat out on Kilman as well. And as we're looking for a third centre-back, in most cases, maybe we even look at O'Brien because he's cheap. And then look at, say, that right back side and say, well, we'll stick with Soufal and we'll use Mavropanos. And then all of a sudden you've got huge units in your defence that can then play. And also it gives that Arsenal kind of element of, if you've got Mavropanos playing right back, for instance, he can tuck inside in certain games and you go to a back three in possession and everyone else can be kind of pushed high. So I think it gives a lot of options.
What about the price tag with this deal? Because we've obviously had around a £30 million, €35 million bid rejected, which is, I would say, a pretty good bid for the type of player Todibo currently is right now. I think it's a good value. I wouldn't want to pay too much more than that. So how high would you guys realistically want to go for this deal? Because, he is a very good player. He's someone that would improve our defense. But for the price tag, I think we need to be a little bit careful with how high we go.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think 40 million euros is probably where I'd call it, if not just because we know for sure that there are players who we can get at that price range, like Danso, who are, they're definitely available. And I think, look, I'll clarify what I meant about the whole Ineos thing. So Ineos outright own Nice, so they own 100% of it. It doesn't matter that Jim Ratcliffe owns 29% of Man United. This is irrelevant. He cannot be seen to sell a player to any other club that he is involved with because he outright owns the other club. So
and they're in the same competition as well.
Exactly. So it's not like the City group. It's not like where City are only 81% owned by the City group and they own 41% of Girona. It's not like that, where, although I don't think that's right either, that's just my personal opinion, I don't think that's right. It's not the same situation because he outright owns Nice. It would basically be, saying, oh, I'm going to bid £20 million for this. Oh, why, yes, thank you. I'll take your £20 million and I'll write that off against myself. Like, it's ridiculous. And potentially any money from any of the other shareholders from Manchester United going to him, he could then just write off and say, here you go, that's back. We can put that against the income of the club. And it's a really scary situation for any other club who's not in this big six, or whose owners don't have the ability to go out and buy multiple clubs, because then they're going to be potentially left behind. They've got these feeder clubs that can do this thing. You know, someone like Todibo, who could potentially make the step up to a top class club. And, you know, I'm not deluding myself to saying that a Liverpool or say a Madrid couldn't come knocking and buy him, but it's the fact that Manchester United should just not be allowed to sign him. It's really as clear cut as that.
Well, if we do manage to sign him for, let's say, 40 million euros, gets the deal done hypothetically, what would you guys rate that transfer out of 10? I personally probably wouldn't go as high as that, but if it was to go for 40 million euros, what are you guys rating that as a transfer?
I think it's 80. I think it's 80. I think it's an 8. Main reason being that if you consider that they were at one point looking at 50, if he comes to the Premier League and does well, I think you easily add on 20 million euros to that, because it's a Premier League player. And if Man United want him, you whack on an extra 20. It's as simple as that. You do that. You look at like Mo Kudus, we signed him, we put an £85 million release clause. We'll probably end up having to put a release clause in there for Todibo. Mm-hmm. But there's every chance as well that maybe we don't spend 40 million. Maybe we also turn around and go, well, again, you're very much interested in going back to France. We're going to take a defender. You're losing a defender. You have a 40-year-old in Dante there as well. Here's a 27-year-old or 28-year-old as he is. 20 million for Todibo and again. We're essentially saying, 20 million for each player, give or take. We obviously said to Leon, who was 38 million, that's not going to fly. But I think if we turn around and said, look, let's say 15, 20 million pounds plus him, that's 40 million easy for it. Obviously, it comes down to how much they value again, if they would be willing to have that conversation. But that would always be a potential thing we can put in kind of the bag or potentially look to offer. Seeing as apparently Gerd is quite happy to go back to France. Obviously, probably would prefer Saudi, but I think
Zuma in there as well if we want.
Zuma as well. But I think it'd be an interesting proposal, because I think whilst 40 million is a lot, I can understand that, and also probably 40 million euros, which would be 35 million pounds. So I can kind of stomach that. It feels about right and about fair. I'd also be willing to kind of chance our arm a little and maybe go, well, how about we throw in a player and see if that player is interested in going as well? Because that could, again, supplement the deal a little bit. I mean, we get a piece of deadwood out and also bring in a quality player for a discounted, shall we say, rate.
What about you, Slough? 40 million euros out of 10?
I think it's an 8. I think for the quality of player you're looking at, I think it's an 8. And, if you were to get an O'Brien or a Kilman in next to him, or not next to him, in depth, and build that sort of squad, Kilman, O'Brien and Todibo, that's a huge step up. It's
a lot of money as well.
It's a lot of money, but it's the sort of thing that you can write off. Todibo's going to want big wages, so he'll replace Zuma's wages, but Kilman will probably also be on fairly big wages. But if we can shift Danny Ings, we cover that. It's O'Brien is not on a lot from my understanding at Lyon. He can come in, he can be the sort of second choice or cover as you like. And that's a huge leap forward squad wise. I think in terms of the money, that's the only place where I think maybe it's a bit of a worry. But in terms of 40 million for him, I think that's a good 8 out of 10, in my opinion.
Okay, well, let us know in the comments down below. Would you like to see Todibo at West Ham? Looks like Lily does. But it'd be interesting to see what happens with this deal. We've obviously had a rumored first bid rejected, so there's 100% concrete interest there. It's just whether we want to go back in for him. We might have even done before this video goes live. Who knows? We shall see. But if you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to leave a like on the video as always. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And lads, until the next one.
Come on, you eyes.